Okay, so in this video we're going to see how to take an EKG. So in order for us to look at the electrical activity of the heart, we have to use the electrocardiogram, and then we have in this case 4 leads or electrodes connected to my body, and then that will help to record part of the electrical activity of the heart. Ideally we will have more leads, but just for the sake of time, and also because we don't use the precordial leads, the leads that goes in the thoracic cavity in the areas where they're supposed to, but then we use these 4 leads or these 4 electrodes. At some point that's enough to know if you have, of course, electrical activity going on in your heart and your body. And then I have connected to the EKG machine 4 electrodes, 2 on my arms and 2 on my hypochondriac regions. So we have the RL, LL electrodes connected to my arms. So this will be corresponding to whatever goes in the right leg, and then this one will be the one that is corresponding to the left leg. Now here on my hypochondriac regions, I have the ones that are connected to the arms, the right arm and the left arm. And then in there, in the monitor, you can see this electrical activity, and if you press an on standby button, then you will be able to see this electrical activity. Now you can print this paper in the electrocardiogram by pressing the print button, but you have to, or the start button, but you have to have this electrical activity of the heart going on in this display. So we have there what we call the B1, B2 and B3 leads, and if you see, there is some tracings for the QRS complex. These tracings at some point that you can see better on the B1 lead, they are at equal intervals of time. So that's good, because that means that my heart is beating regularly at regular intervals of time. Since we don't have all the complete leads, you will be able to see some background noise or lines that are not part of the EKG, but this is just because we have that. So now I'm going to have this electrical activity being recorded in this, and then you press the start button, and then you can see how this paper will be printed. Well, it seems like the machine ran out of paper, but or something's going on, but essentially, oh, here it is. Essentially, that's what you will be doing in the lab. And then, so things that you can see here is, like I said, the QRS found at intervals of time that are regular. And then when you are reading at least the heart rate, what you will do is count the number of big squares, these large squares, in between 2 QRS complex, which are this. Okay, so starting here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 big squares. So you divide 300 by the number of big squares. So that will give me a heart rate of around 65 beats per minute, as you can see here. If you were perfectly 5 squares, if you divide 300 by 5, that will be 60. But since it's a little bit less, it's like 4 big squares that you see here and 0.8, so this is 4.8 or 4/5 of a square, so it's 4.8. So you divide 300 by 4.8, that will give you 65. Okay, and at some point that's the only thing that we can determine in here, because the P wave, which is kind of this one in here, is hard to see, and then the T wave, which is supposed to be here, it's also hard to see. And then you see all these lines, this is background noise. It's basically the interference of the not well connected electrodes and the lack of the other ones. So you can see only the electrical activity on ABR, ABL, ABF leads, and then the two second leading here, 1, 2, and 3, but you don't see the ones for the precordial leads, which are these B1 through B6. But with this, at some point, it's enough, like I said, at least for calculating the number of beats per minute. And at some point, just think about that each of these big squares, it is 0.2 of a second. And within these big squares, you have small squares that corresponds to 0.04 of a second. So when you have this number of seconds in mind that each of these little squares or big squares corresponds to, you can measure the time for the QRS, the time for the Q or PR complex or interval, which runs between the beginning of the P and the starting of the Q, and all these different parameters that are asked for you in the lab report for measuring parts of the EKG in the readings that we have in the lab report. But for sure, like I said, in this practice EKG, you can just measure the number of beats per minute, calculating the number of big squares between two R complexes or two R waves, okay, which in this case again was 4.8. So if you divide 300 by 4.8, it's supposed to give you around 65 bits per minute. And this is all for this video, and I will see you in the next.